There exists a photograph, secured within a vault in Virginia, that remains to this day. It captures a child whose very existence defied explanation. A boy born in 1938 to parents whose lineage had intertwined for 16 generations. His family celebrated him as a miracle. Medical professionals used a different term. The anomalies discovered within that child's body would eventually compel an entire lineage to face a truth they had evaded for 2 centuries. What transpires when the pursuit of purity transforms into confinement? That narrative unfolds here, and its reality is more disturbing than anticipated. Hello everyone. Before proceeding, please remember to like and subscribe to the channel and drop a comment indicating your location and viewing time. This helps YouTube continue recommending stories similar to this one. In 1649, the Mather family first set foot in colonial Virginia. They were English gentry, minor aristocracy equipped with land grants and a surname carrying weight back in London. However, America provided them with something England never could: absolute, uncontested authority over who joined their lineage and who remained excluded. Back then, they didn't frame it as obsession. They termed it preservation. By 1700, the Mathers had formalized what their private letters referred to as the Covenant. Its premise was straightforward. Intermarry within the family. Consolidate the land. Maintain the name's purity. Keep the bloodline unmixed. During the initial generations, this practice wasn't remarkable. Among the colonial elite, cousin marriages were commonplace. Yet while other families eventually broadened their horizons, introduced new blood, and evolved with a transforming society, the Mathers intensified their commitment. They constructed their estate, Ashford Hall, positioned 30 miles from the closest settlement. Their children received education at home. Worship occurred in a private chapel on their property. By 1800, they had formed an impenetrable circle. And that circle continued constricting. The family maintained exhaustive documentation, leather-bound genealogies chronicling each birth, marriage, and union. They weren't merely recording history. They were manufacturing it. First cousins wedded first cousins. Subsequently, second cousins intermarried. Their offspring replicated this pattern across successive generations. The same names cycled endlessly: Thomas, Elizabeth, William, Margaret. The identical faces reappeared throughout daguerreotypes and oil paintings, resembling reflections of reflections. By 1900, the Mathers weren't merely isolated. They had become biologically distinctive, essentially their own population, and they took pride in this distinction. They convinced themselves they had accomplished something extraordinary, something hallowed. They believed their blood surpassed all others in Virginia, perhaps throughout America. They thought they had shielded themselves from external contamination. They remained completely unaware of what they had truly accomplished. During the 1870s, initial indicators emerged, though nobody interpreted them as warnings. A daughter arrived with 6 fingers on her left hand. A son experienced such severe leg bowing that walking always brought pain. A stillbirth occurred. Then another. Then 3 within a single year. The family attributed these occurrences to divine will. They conducted private burial services. They interred these children in the family cemetery behind Ashford Hall beneath stones listing no causes of death. Correspondents never mentioned these losses. Outsiders never heard about them. And they certainly never ceased intermarrying. By 1900, the Mather family tree had transformed into something fundamentally different. It no longer resembled a tree. It had become a knot, complex weave of lines repeatedly folding back upon themselves. Attempting to map it revealed identical names occupying multiple positions simultaneously. A man existing as someone's uncle, second cousin, and grandfather concurrently. A woman functioning as both aunt and sister-in-law to the same individual. The mathematics governing kinship had completely broken down. What remained was something biology was never designed to accommodate. Yet the external world barely noticed. The Mathers remained reclusive. Their wealth allowed eccentricity to be interpreted as tradition. Their land holdings made isolation appear chosen rather than necessary. On their infrequent visits to town, observers noted how uniformly they appeared. The distinctive sharp nose, the characteristic deep-set eyes, that particular head carriage, tilted slightly backward, as though perpetually gazing down upon something inferior. People remarked on their aristocratic appearance, their purity. Nobody articulated what they genuinely resembled, copies deteriorating with each successive generation. Then 1923 arrived. A daughter, Catherine, tempted departure. She was 17. She had consumed books smuggled by a sympathetic tutor. She had viewed photographs depicting the world extending beyond the estate. Richmond attracted her, perhaps destinations even farther. She informed her father of her desire to marry someone external to the family. Someone new. The conversation lasted for minutes. Her father, Thomas Mather VI, articulated his position unequivocally. Departure would render her dead to them. Her name would disappear from the family Bible. Her image would be removed from the portraits. She would become non-existent. Catherine remained. 6 months afterward, she wedded her first cousin. His name was also Thomas. Catherine and Thomas welcomed their initial child in 1925, a daughter. She survived 3 days. Their second child arrived in 1927, a son. He survived yet never uttered a sound throughout his entire existence. He would position himself in the nursery corner, rocking perpetually, his gaze fixed upon nothing. The family physician, Harold Brennan, who had attended the Mathers for 3 decades, recorded in his private journal that the boy seemed imprisoned within a realm inaccessible to others. Their third child was born in 1929, another daughter. Initially she appeared healthy. Then at age 4, seizures began, 10, sometimes 15 daily. She died before reaching her 8th birthday. Yet Catherine and Thomas persisted because Mathers persevered. You produced heirs. You perpetuated the lineage. By 1935, Catherine had experienced 7 pregnancies. 3 children survived beyond infancy. None were entirely normal. The family ceased inviting the physician to holiday gatherings. They stopped hosting the rare visitors who still ventured to Ashford Hall. Shutters remained closed. Gates stayed locked. Within those walls, something was disintegrating. Then, in January 1938, Catherine conceived again. She was 32 and depleted. Her body had endured excessive strain. Yet this pregnancy differed. She experienced no illness. She lacked the complications that had marked her previous pregnancies. For the initial time in years, hope emerged. Perhaps this child would be the one. Perhaps this child would be flawless. Perhaps this child would finally validate the covenant's righteousness. The boy arrived on September 14, 1938. They named him William, honoring his great-great-grandfather and the great-great-grandfather preceding him. When Dr. Brennan initially viewed the infant, he remained speechless for an entire minute. The attending nurses were bound to secrecy. Catherine clutched her son and wept, not from joy, but from something else, something still unnamed, because William Mather was exquisite, uncannily so. His features exhibited perfection, symmetry, almost radiance. His eyes shone bright and clear. Yet when Dr. Brennan examined him more thoroughly, away from Catherine's observation, he discovered something that caused his hands to tremble while documenting his findings. This child wasn't merely unusual. This child was impossible. William's heart occupied the right side of his chest. Not the left, where it belonged, but the right. A condition termed dextrocardia. Rare, yet not unprecedented. However, that wasn't all. His liver positioned itself on the left. His stomach was inverted. Every major organ within his body mirrored the correct placement. Complete situs inversus. Dr. Brennan had encountered references in medical literature. It occurred in perhaps one of every 10,000 births. Yet there was more. William possessed additional bones in his feet, small vestigial structures serving no function. His skull displayed slight misshaping, insufficient for visual detection, yet palpable upon careful examination. Ridges existed where ridges shouldn't. Gaps had sealed either prematurely or belatedly. And his blood, when Brennan extracted samples, revealed cellular structure abnormalities. The red blood cells were deformed. Some excessively large, others too small. His white blood cell count was irregular. His platelets failed to aggregate correctly. It seemed as though William's body had been constructed from a blueprint duplicated repeatedly until errors had infiltrated every system. Yet the child survived. He breathed. He cried. He fed. And as weeks passed, he began developing. The family celebrated quietly. They convinced themselves that William's differences were merely curiosities. After all, he existed. He was a Mather. He would perpetuate the name. Dr. Brennan offered no contradiction. Yet in his journal, he recorded, "I have delivered a child who should not exist. I cannot determine whether he represents a miracle or a warning." By the time William reached 6 months, additional characteristics emerged. He didn't respond to sound as other infants did. Loud noises failed to startle him. Music provided no comfort. Initially they suspected deafness, but he wasn't deaf. He could hear. He simply exhibited no reaction. His eyes tracked movement, yet something was absent from his gaze, something that should have been present but wasn't. When Catherine held him, he didn't conform to her body as babies typically do. He remained rigid, remote, as though inhabiting an entirely different space. The family began whispering. Late at night in rooms beyond servant hearing, they started voicing the question they'd avoided for a century and a half. What have we done? William turned 2 in 1940. He still hadn't spoken. He walked, but with an odd shuffling motion, as though his legs weren't properly attached. He didn't engage with toys. He never laughed. He would spend hours fixated on the drawing room wallpaper, tracing the patterns with his eyes repeatedly. The other children in the household, his older siblings, avoided him, not from cruelty, but from instinct. Something about William unsettled them, something indefinable. Dr. Brennan visited less frequently now. He was 73, and his hands shook when holding his stethoscope. Yet in spring 1941, Catherine insisted he examine William again. The boy had started doing something new, something frightening to her. He would position himself before the hallway mirror and contemplate his reflection for hours. Not playing, not making expressions, simply staring. And sometimes late at night, she would hear him in his room talking. Not actual words precisely, more like sounds, rhythmic, repetitive, resembling a language with no human origin. Brennan arrived on a cold March afternoon. He discovered William in the library, sitting perfectly motionless in a chair far too large for him. The boy's eyes were open yet unfocused. Brennan addressed him. No response. He clapped his hands near William's ear. Nothing. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder and William's head turned slowly, mechanically until their eyes connected. Brennan would later write that in that moment, he felt as though he were observing something that was observing him through William, not from him, something utilizing the boy's eyes as portals. The examination consumed an hour. Brennan measured. He listened. He evaluated reflexes. Then he performed something he'd never done in 50 years of medical practice. He requested the family to exit the room. When they were alone, Brennan seated himself across from William and addressed him as though speaking to an adult. He said, "I don't know what you are, but I recognize you're not what they believe you are." William's expression remained unchanged. Yet his lips moved. And for the initial time in his existence, William Mather spoke. A single word, clear, precise, unmistakable. He said, "Neither. If you're still viewing, you've already demonstrated more courage than most. Share in the comments what course you would have taken if this were your lineage." Dr. Brennan departed Ashford Hall that evening and never came back. He composed one final journal entry dated March 18, 1941. It stated, "Certain phenomena exceed medical explanation. Certain outcomes science predicted, yet humanity refused to acknowledge. The Mathers have generated something inhabiting the space between what we are and what we were never intended to become. I've advised them to seek assistance beyond my competence. I doubt they will." He passed away 4 months later. Heart failure. The journal was discovered in his desk drawer, secured alongside his will. His daughter incinerated it after reading merely 3 pages. She never disclosed to anyone what she'd witnessed written there. The family did not pursue assistance. Instead, they reached a decision. William would remain at home. He would receive private education. He would be shielded from the external world, precisely as the family had always been shielded. They convinced themselves this represented kindness. Yet it was fear. Fear of what physicians might disclose. Fear of what society might think. Fear of what William himself might expose regarding what 16 generations of the Covenant had produced. Consequently, the boy matured in silence, in isolation, within a house that had transformed into a mausoleum for a bloodline refusing extinction. As William aged, the physical abnormalities grew more pronounced. By age 10, his spine had started curving in ways defying normal scoliosis. His joints exhibited hypermobility, bending at angles causing servants to avert their gaze. His teeth emerged crooked, overcrowded, some developing behind others. Yet his mind represented the genuine enigma. He taught himself reading by age 5, though nobody had instructed him. He performed complex mathematics mentally. He spoke when he chose to speak in perfectly constructed sentences sounding rehearsed for weeks. Yet he possessed no empathy, no emotional connection. He would observe his mother crying and tilt his head like a bird examining an insect. By 1950, the family had diminished. Catherine died during childbirth attempting one final pregnancy. Thomas drank himself to death 2 years afterward. The surviving siblings scattered, some to other Virginia regions, others farther away, desperate to escape Ashford Hall and everything it symbolized. William remained alone, except for 2 elderly servants compensated sufficiently to maintain silence. The estate deteriorated. Paint peeled. Gardens grew wild. Gates rusted shut. And inside, William Mather inhabited the decaying monument to his family's obsession. A living artifact demonstrating what occurs when purity transforms into pathology. William Mather survived until 1993. 55 years old. He never married, never departed the estate, never produced children. The Mather line, that unbroken chain stretching back to 1649, terminated with him. When county authorities finally investigated the property after years of unpaid taxes, they discovered him in the library, deceased in the same chair where Dr. Brennan had examined him half a century earlier. The autopsy disclosed what the family had spent generations refusing to acknowledge. William's organs were failing, had been failing for years. His kidneys were malformed. His liver was scarred. His reversed heart, despite its position, possessed improperly closing chambers. He harbored tumors in locations where tumors rarely develop. His bones were brittle, riddled with microfractures. Genetically, the medical examiner recorded, William Mather exhibited the biological profile of someone whose parents were more closely related than first cousins, closer than siblings. DNA analysis revealed something that shouldn't exist beyond laboratory conditions, homozygosity at a level incompatible with extended survival. The estate was liquidated. Ashford Hall was demolished in 1997. Developers constructed a subdivision on the land. Families moved in. Children now play in yards where the Mather Cemetery once rested. The headstones were transferred to a municipal graveyard. No historical marker was installed. No plaque explains what occurred there. The Mather family Bible containing 16 generations of meticulously documented marriages was donated to a university archive. It resides in a climate-controlled vault accessible to researchers by appointment. Almost nobody requests viewing it. Yet the medical records endured. Dr. Brennan's journal, or whatever survived of it, eventually reached a medical historian in 2008. She published a paper examining the Mathers, modifying names, altering identifying specifics, yet preserving the essential truth intact. It evolved into a case study, a cautionary tale, evidence supporting what geneticists had asserted for decades, that inbreeding depression represents more than mere theory, that genetic load accumulates, that recessive alleles, harmless when paired with healthy genes, become devastating when they lack alternative destinations, that families isolating themselves don't preserve purity, they concentrate damage. The paper calculated that by the 16th generation, William Mather's coefficient of inbreeding approximated 0.39. For perspective, offspring of full siblings exhibit a coefficient of 0.25. William's parents weren't merely related. They represented products of a genetic bottleneck so extreme that William himself essentially constituted the offspring of what genomics would classify as a single ancestral individual duplicated and recombined until the copies deteriorated. He wasn't an individual. He represented an endpoint. People frequently ask when hearing this story. They inquire, how could they remain unaware? How could an entire family, educated individuals, wealthy individuals, people with access to physicians and literature and the external world, not comprehend their actions? Yet they did comprehend. At some level, they always understood. The stillbirths communicated to them. The deformities communicated to them. The children who never spoke, who seized, who died young, all communicated to them. Yet comprehension and acceptance represent different phenomena. The Mathers prioritized their bloodline above their children. They prioritized tradition above survival. They prioritized the concept of purity above the reality of purity's cost. William Mather's photograph continues existing. It resides in that university archive accompanying the family Bible. He's 12 years old in the image, positioned before Ashford Hall wearing an excessively large suit. His face appears pale, beautiful in that unsettling manner. His eyes gaze directly into the camera. And if you observe sufficiently long, you begin experiencing what Dr. Brennan experienced, that you're not observing a person. You're observing the final page of a book that should never have been composed. A narrative concluding in the only manner possible, with silence, with deterioration, with a bloodline so pure it poisoned itself. The Mathers believed they were safeguarding something sacred. What they actually safeguarded was a genetic time bomb. And William represented the detonation. The final Mather, the conclusion of 16 generations. The child nobody could explain because explaining him required acknowledging what the family had inflicted upon itself. And certain truths proved too dreadful to articulate aloud, even when they're reflecting back at you from a mirror. Even when they're inscribed in your. Subscribe the channel.